I didn't realize just how much of an impact it also has on dads. That was something that, I guess isn't really spoken about enough. Like, I'd listened to so much and spoken to other women, but there's not a lot of dads that actually speak about what they go through. And, the rates of postpartum depression for men are actually really high. So that is, definitely a conversation that, my partner Tice is speaking a lot about in the work that he does, because it is so important for men to understand that they go through, I actually can't remember what the term is, but there's like a male version of that matrescence that starts to happen.
On this week's episode, I talk to 3 epic humans that I know, all of who are mums, about pregnancy and postpartum. We talk about the importance of staying connected during pregnancy and postpartum. We talk about what postpartum looks like for men. We talk about women being touched out, getting creative when it comes to intimacy, healing as a mum, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Genoa Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's wellbeing and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week, we deep dive with your favourite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Up the top, you'll see a section for programs. Click on the programs, you'll see our Mastermind, and you can sign up there now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000. We look forward to seeing you part of the Mastermind. Rach, Cass, Em, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you could all say hello at the same time, but you just decided to
I was like, who's going to go first?
One at a time. Who's going to go first?
Hello.
We'll do our best to manage 4 of us on a call. So lots to talk about today. Pregnancy, the birth, post-pregnancy, how blokes can do the best they possibly can, which as a student of this space, I have absolutely no idea. And I know I'm not the only one. So I'm looking forward to talking and getting insight from you 3 women as to what you needed, what worked and what didn't. And we will start off with just a quick little intro from each of you, just a little bit about yourselves. Em, starting with you.
Well, thanks for having us all. This is really exciting. I've actually never met these other amazing women, so I'm excited to hear your stories as well. My name's Emma Maidmond. I am a mama. I have a little boy who is just over 2, and I have another one that is halfway baked in my belly right now. I live with my partner here in Byron Bay, and we run an online business together. And I do a lot of coaching in the motherhood space, specifically with meditation and practices like that for mums. So I'm really, really passionate about rewriting the scripts of motherhood and birth and everything. I had a really incredible home birth experience, and I'm going into that for my second as well. And I just love being able to share positive birth and postpartum experiences to help other people, because knowledge is really power, particularly for partners as well, going into all of this.
Awesome. Cass Harvey.
Hello, how are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. I could teach you something straight off the bat. The the afterbirth is called postpartum.
Postpartum.
So yeah, instead of pre-pregnancy or pre-birth, it's called postpartum.
Beautiful. All these things I'm learning.
I am a mama of 2 beautiful girls. Callie will be 6 in May, and Oka has just turned 2. Callie's pregnancy, birth, becoming a mum was really a catalyst for so much change, so much initiation, as it is for every mum. But I am a full-time mama. So home with my girls. My eldest has just started kindy at a Steiner school. So yeah, I'm just supporting my girls and my husband, who runs a few different businesses. So yeah, that's me.
Beautiful. And Rach.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm Rachel and I am also a mum. I have 2 kids. So my eldest Lucas is 7, almost 8, which is just crazy. I can't believe I've been in the motherhood world for that long. And my youngest is Bella. She is 4. And plans to have more, just not just yet, but definitely on the horizon. So I guess I am a PT, nutrition coach, online coach, very similar to Emma. I guess motherhood in particular really forced me in my own initiation, again, like Cass as well. But basically, I was brought to my knees, and my healthy practices, I guess, through what I knew about nutrition and moving my body is what I believe carried me through and sort of saved me. And I got to kind of keep that piece of identity for myself. And I just realized how many other mums sort of didn't feel the same. And I had very healthy pregnancies that I don't believe were just luck. I think I'd set foundations before, kind of unknowingly, but they carried me through. And like I said, postpartum is hard enough as it is, but when you don't have strong and healthy foundations, whether that's through your food or your exercise or your mental health, anything, it can be so much harder than it needs to be. And I think obviously we're going to go into detail about all of the things we can, I guess, be aware of in terms of for ourselves, but also our partners. So I'm just really grateful that I'm here and we're doing our part in and having these conversations, and that, like, full credit to you, Blake, for being willing to have a conversation with 3 mums in a field that you don't know anything about yet. And to some degree, you'll never be a mother and feel the things that we will go through as women. So yeah, it's just really nice to be here and have this convo with you guys.
Yeah, I have no idea about any of it and looking forward to learning today. So one of the things that I think all 3 of you brought up then, which is super valuable, and I'm really interested in your own unique experiences and stories around it, is the initiation. Cass, do you want to start with how you would see your initiation and even potentially the difference between the first and your second?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my entry into motherhood was a little bit different in the fact that Callie was not planned. So, and to be honest, I had never thought about being a mother. You know how there's some women who that's what they dream of, that's what they aspire to. When I fell pregnant, it was really something that I was like, I've never even thought about this, to be honest. Especially in our society, there's a lot of, don't have sex, don't get pregnant. But then there's no transition into what to do when you actually do and the support around that. So yeah, me and my husband had only been together dating for 4 months at the time. So it was a big shock. And I was very sick my whole pregnancy, but it actually, and I was very confused by everyone's excitement. I hadn't been around children. So I obviously knew that kids existed, but just what blessings they are. And I was really confused by everyone's excitement. I was like, this is terrible. Like, I didn't mean for this to happen. I feel awful. Why is everyone so excited? So I think my entry was a little bit different because then when she was born, I was hit with that all-consuming instant love, which I know some people talk about they do have and some people talk about they don't. And then I was like, I get it. So I think I was actually talking with my PT about it recently, who is a guy, and he likened it to buying festival tickets a long way out and being really excited and having a really high expectation. And obviously I have an expectation. He goes, when you just decide last minute to go out and it's like the best night ever? And I'm like, yes. So there's a little thing for guys to reference it to. So yeah, it was when I finally had her, I had a really empowering birth. So yeah, when I finally had her, I was like, oh, wow, I get it. And really came into postpartum on a high. I know there's a lot of other instances where people are really shocked by birth and really have birth trauma and everything. So yeah, I guess I came in and pregnancy was quite the initiation, but birth and the start of postpartum was almost like this beautiful bliss bubble in a way. So yeah.
When you speak to the initiation, so obviously you and Dave were real fresh.
Yeah.
What did you what did you need from Dave, and whether you got it or not? You guys have obviously, it's so many years ago, but what do you think upon reflection might have helped you or, did help you in that kind of initiation that you had?
I think I definitely was very lucky in the fact that Dave really stepped up. He is 10 years older than me and has always wanted kids. So I think just on that level itself, he was able to be like, okay, well, how can I support you through this experience? Because it's obviously it was very challenging for me mentally to decide, all right, this is what I want to do, even if it wasn't planned. Yeah, so he was really beautiful. We only moved in together 2 months before we had Callie, which in hindsight, it's funny because I have talked to a lot of women who it changed, they've been together 10 years, they've been together 5 years, and then they have a baby, and it's like they have to reorientate themselves with each other. Whereas Dave and I really went into it how does this work? And we set the foundations from there, which I think, in hindsight was a real blessing. The initiation, I guess, was in pregnancy. I guess it was, for me, getting rid of the first layer of ridding of that people pleasing, because my pregnancy wasn't what my family expected. I wasn't married. I wasn't what my group of friends and circle expected. So that was the first okay, how are you going to sit in this? Because there were hard conversations that were had. And I guess that was my first layer of but what do I want? Yeah.
What was the overarching feeling in that period when the dogma and the kind of conditioning tells us that it should look a certain way? What did you find was your inner dialogue and kind of feelings that came up in the way that you guys did it slightly differently?
I guess that I was irresponsible, I was trying to think back. Irresponsible, just this big fear of what other people were thinking or saying about it, especially because the relationship prior to Dave had ended not all that long before I got with Dave. So there was also friendship groups there. And I was just so petrified of what people would think. And I mean, it's beautiful in hindsight because as a mum, to do best by your child, you have to start stepping up and realizing that you're going to have to do and say things that people don't like in order to protect your babies and hold their boundaries and hold their emotions in their space. So I think pregnancy, birth, motherhood always initiates you into the parent you need to be for that baby.
Rach, one of the things Cass mentioned there was the reorientation of, I guess, the relationship. When you think about you and Nick, what have you had to reorientate and how's it look?
It's so interesting. I mean, I know Cass. She's one of my good friends, but it's really interesting to hear her speak because I didn't know her back then. And my initiation, whilst the initiation is, I guess, the same, but it looks very different because I was with, I guess I did all the right things. I got married first and all of that, but I was initiated in a different way in terms of that I was desperate to become a mum. I have felt it in my bones for as long as I can remember. I've been that teenager and that child who's just obsessed with babies, just would love to hold them and just felt so much love and just felt a really big mothering instinct. And so part of my unknowing initiation was my struggles to fall pregnant, which it doesn't even sound that long. It was only 12 months. But when you are so desperate for something and every single day is like a living hell until you get what it is that you desire, I was just so brought to my knees over and over again. And that put a really big strain on our relationship because, sex means something completely different when you're right, okay, when am I ovulating? I just became this, I don't know, ovulating tracking robot that was just nah, not today. It's not worth it. And we had no awareness sort of back then to have these conversations. I was just going through these desperate motions of just month by month and trying to fall pregnant and learning the beautiful lesson of surrender that never ends as a mum. But so it was hard in that sense. And obviously we had a life that was just the two of us for a while, so different to Cass in that But sometimes, as you were saying that, Cass, I was like, well, there wasn't really much for you to sort of compare to when you just felt pregnant. You're kind of like, well, we just have to like roll with this, version of our relationship and how we're going to support each other when someone else is going to be in the picture. I had so many years of that then the initiation of having somebody in between us was so big that it took us probably a year and a half to realize what was happening and how much disconnection and separation we had between us, because it had been just us for so long. And I guess you don't really address things because they're not as obvious when there's not any other pressure or any other little thing that's in between that's requiring so much of your time and energy. I guess you so have so much space that maybe stuff it can go under the surface quite easily. So that's for us. For me in our relationship, it was probably a year and a half when my son was a year and a half. And he, I went from being desperate to finally falling pregnant, which is a whole other journey in itself that really taught me about health and surrender and stuff like that. Then, I had a beautiful pregnancy. I had a beautiful birth. And then I was confronted with how hard motherhood was and how challenging Lucas was, because my idea and perception of a good baby was so skewed that then I was confronted with the fact that, like, holy shit, I wanted this for so long and I got it. And now I'm like, oh, what have I done? Like, I don't think this is what I didn't realize this was it. Like, why didn't no one tell me this? Or why is my baby so hard and everyone else is so easy? What have I done wrong? How can I fix this? And it was just control and fix. And I had no support and intuition into actually like what is normal sleeping and feeding and emotions from children and so much, which I'm sure you other ladies agree. I can see you nodding your heads. So then, I almost felt, and, my husband went back to work and I was at home. So then you feel quite alone there. And it wasn't until sort of like, a year and a half later that I was like, everything sucks. Like, my son's not a baby anymore. He's a toddler, but I still feel like I'm drowning and, there's no connection here. And we had a lot of hard conversations and a hard road of a good few years. And that sort of was my big catalyst for self-work and self-development and me realizing what I want and how to communicate. And again, my son being the driver for that and my biggest teacher still. So the initiation can look very different, but I think, it's whether we are conscious of the opportunities that can come with that as well. Because, you can do all the self-development in the world and have the best coaches, but I'm telling you now, your children will be the biggest teachers. They will show you every blind spot and every area that you can improve on if you are willing to see their challenges and your challenges in the pregnancy and the birth and the relationships after that as well. So I don't even remember what question you asked me, but
I liked your answer. That's all that matters. I liked your answer. And one of the things that Rach mentioned there, which plays on my mind a lot, and I'm interested in knowing how you and Tice navigated it, is the disconnection and separation in that first 18 months in particular. Was that a conscious thing that you guys were aware of? Did you notice that unfold in the relationship? And what have you had to do to keep coming back to you two?
So I went into motherhood very, very aware of lots of things. We did a first 40-day bubble because I spoke to so many mums that were like, I totally regret having a house full of visitors and I'm sitting there on the couch, breast milk everywhere, bleeding, and all these randoms are holding my baby and I'm feeling shit and confused. And so I am very much like, how can I learn from other people and then not have to go through that myself in those ways? So we did this first 40-day bubble, which was just us and River. He was born at home, so we didn't leave the house for those 40 days. And we had meal deliveries and people dropping things at our door. And I think that really, really helped set us up for that transitional process. So the initiation that you're referring to is often referred to as matrescence. And it's basically a thing that happens to a woman when they become a mother. It can start in pregnancy and go all the way through. It's a term that was coined back in the 80s and is only really just starting to become spoken about. But you essentially go through the same hormonal shifts that you do in adolescence. So if you think back to how you were when you were a teenager, for me, that was a very intense period of my life, hormones everywhere, acting out, parents divorce, all of these things going on. That is what's happening hormonally and emotionally and spiritually to a woman when she's going through that initiative process of becoming a mother. You don't just birth a child and suddenly you are the embodiment of mother. It's a long journey, and postpartum is referred to as, the first 6 weeks, but it really is forever. I think a lot of the mums here are like, who have 8-year-olds and 6-year-olds, you're like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily get easier. You get stronger, but the lessons just keep on coming. So that matrescence journey was also something I was really aware of. So I knew that I was going to be going through huge changes and emotions and whatnot. I knew that Tyson would also be going through the same. I guess I didn't realize just how much of an impact it also has on dads. That was something that, I guess isn't really spoken about enough. Like, I'd listened to so much and spoken to other women, but there's not a lot of dads that actually speak about what they go through. And, the rates of postpartum depression for men are actually really high. So that is, definitely a conversation that, my partner Tice is speaking a lot about in the work that he does, because it is so important for men to understand that they go through, I actually can't remember what the term is, but there's like a male version of that matrescence that starts to happen. So I knew that going into it, that I was going to be going through all of these changes and that would then impact on our relationship. One of the best things that we did was have a lot of hard conversations before that phase kicked in. So my mindset was knowing, okay, I know that I don't know how birth's going to go, what postpartum's going to be like, what motherhood's going to be like. I've got all these ideas based on other people's stories and things, but obviously I need to walk that path myself. But let's mitigate potential drama by having those hard conversations now, like about medical choices, about birth preferences, about schooling, about, raising your children, talking about your own childhood traumas and what are things that your parents did that you definitely don't want to do in parenting, and what are things that you loved, and having these kinds of conversations, because you don't really know what your parenting style or whatever, you might think you're going to be one way and it turns out a completely different. But understanding where each other's perspective is coming from, because so many people I work with get blindsided by simple things like they'll be 3 days postpartum and they're like talking about, oh, we'll send our kid to a Steiner school. And their partner's like, what are you talking about? They're going to some like fancy private school. And then they're like, I have all these hormones rushing through my body. I hate you. And then boom, the whole thing erupts. So having those conversations, and we all, it evolves. We continue to have those conversations, but having those conversations was so important to us, and being open to knowing that it would change. And it definitely did. Like, we had to really redefine what intimacy was. It's suddenly you go from just like having sex all the time and being connected to, we chose to co-sleep with River. So then all of a sudden we had a baby in between us in the bed, and it's like, oh, you're over there. Hi. And so we noticed that, okay, this is starting to actually put a rift in our relationship. I never experienced feeling touched out in the baby phase. I wanted touch. I was like, I have little tiny hands all over my boobies all day. I want big hands on them. Like, I want to feel held and supported by like big man arms that aren't little tiny scratchy ones. So I know that for a lot of women, it's the opposite. They're like, get the fuck away from me. I don't want you to touch me. So then it's redefining intimacy. So we would do things like, he would go to bed at night. We'd put him to the side of the bed, and then we'd both just cuddle naked for a little bit and just feel that we were connected. And then obviously he'd wake for a feed and I'd move over the other side of the bed and end up with my eye mask and looking incredibly unattractive for the rest of the night. But we'd have those moments of connection and just redefining what that looked like. And then it's totally ebbed and flowed since then. There's been moments where, we're just making love all the time and we're so connected in that way and we just feel like lovers. And then we also have the other complexity of running a business together. So then we can switch into work mode, and all we're then doing is parenting and working. And then it becomes like, oh, hang on, we need to actually schedule in some date nights, and we need to cut some work evenings so that we're on the couch cuddling and connecting and opening up that pathway for intimacy rather than just talking about business the whole time. So I think boundaries there are really important, and communicating what you need. Like for Tice, when he is tired and exhausted and feeling like sleep deprived, the last thing he wants to do is make love. Like, he's not one of those guys that's just always up for it. He's like, I'm fucking tired. I'd rather go to bed. And so then for me, it was like, well, I feel like I've had a nap today when River had his nap, so I'm good. And he's like, I'm tired. And so then you have to navigate that. So I think it's really honest and open communication, communicating your needs, but then being open to be flexible with what that looks like. So if you're like, I actually don't feel like connecting in XYZ way, how about we do this instead? And it's cliche, but genuinely making an effort for it, because otherwise it is so easy to fall into work and then you're tired and then the kids and blah, blah, blah. And then you fall asleep putting them to bed every night. Like there'll be some nights where I say to Tice, if I fall asleep putting him down, can you actually come wake me up? Because I do want to come and spend time with you. I don't need to go to bed at 7 o'clock tonight. It's just that when you sing nursery rhymes on repeat, they put you to sleep. So it's genuinely making the time in a way that's not like forcing it, being honest about what your capacity is in that moment. I think that's really helped us navigate. I mean, we're just over 2 years into all of this and about to go into the rocky world of then introducing another baby, and time commitments and all of that will shift again around that. We're very eyes open about that transitionary process as well. So I think it's that, and also just honoring the season. Like if you, listening to these other women, their relationships continue on, right? And they evolve. And so the season of life that you're in right now might be really intense while you have young children and newborns and you're not sleeping and whatever. And then suddenly those kids start going to camps and having sleepovers at friends' house, and you get nights to yourself. And, the season of your relationship changes just as the seasons of motherhood and matrescence all ebb and flow. It's never linear.
Cass, when it comes to you and Dave and intimacy and connection, what did you notice for you guys about how that kind of showed up after your first one? And was there any story, wounds, triggers that came up for either of you two as the dynamic changed?
So the start of with Callie, off the back of my birth, I was on a high and I was just in overdrive. Like I didn't rest. I didn't go into it as consciously as you am. I loved how beautiful. Oh,
I'm like,
I often think about that. I know. I often think about that. And I think, no, this was supposed to be our journey and the way that we were supposed to evolve together as mother, daughter, family unit. But yeah, Callie had really bad reflux, never slept more than 40 minutes at a time. And it wasn't until that 6-month mark that I got burnt out. Like I was just going and going and going, having people over, like being the perfect mum, the perfect wife. And I got super burnt out and was faced with a lot of pressure to sleep train because, and Dave was burnt out as well. He works super early hours and then super late in the night. With intimacy, I feel like it was non-existent maybe for the first year. Like not non-existent, but it was we were just exhausted. And I just felt so grateful that Dave was like, I felt like he was in it with me. It wasn't like, okay, you're parenting at night. Like he was like, what are we doing? So I felt like he was really there with me. Like I know a lot of other mums can feel like there's a lot of pressure to have sex. Like I didn't feel that. I was just exhausted and he was exhausted. And I think it was maybe after like the 1 year mark, we were like, oh, we have to actually prioritize it. Like it doesn't just happen like it used to. You actually and it sounds so cliche, but just saying, hey, tonight, and then like letting the foreplay be through the day of like little communication and stuff, because you might not have that time to really, so you've got to start to build that throughout the day. Both my experiences with both the girls sort of at the 1 and 18-month mark, then I felt more myself in an intimacy setting. Before that, it felt a bit like it's hard. Like I felt like I was like feeding, like I was probably the opposite to Em. Like I'm feeding and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is have someone close to me. And I don't know, like another thing to do, which I hated viewing it as that. But I was just, it's the first 18 months I found is really intense. And then with both of the girls after that, I felt like more myself. Obviously they're sleeping for that, that little bit longer. So that's when we really prioritized it. And but it's just such you actually have to set time for it and make it a priority. And when you do that, you're like, you reap the benefits of it massively. Like the connection between me and Dave in the last 6 to 9 months since Oka has been past that, really intense phase has been so beautiful. to come back to. And I think especially with this second, in that first year, we're like, we know we're going to get ourselves back again. Obviously, we're making effort to have that time, but it's just not what it is going to be. So it's about just accepting the season and doing what you can with it.
Rach, when you think about your situation and maybe your first 12 months, obviously Em and Cass have both felt different in terms of touch. What did you notice about your interest, your desire, your intimacy, lack of? What did you notice? And even your dialogue around how you should show up. What was the dialogue for you like in that first 12 months post?
It's so interesting. Like, I'm really just loving being here and hearing so many different perspectives, because obviously Emma's like that awareness and those hard conversations before is just like, I can just imagine absolute game changer. And that probably was the game changer between my first and my second, and will be moving forward as well. Because the conversations just change. But if you have that open level of connection, like I think of what I know about you, Blake and Shani, and the level of like the fact that you guys have a ritual, every Sunday to just meet, like that as a mother could just, I could just imagine myself having a very long list of things where I'm like, right, this is what I need to tell you right now. But just having that, I think would be just the biggest game changer. But I didn't know that I needed that, and it wasn't him; it was us. In that we both needed to show up differently. But you're in the thick of it, and you don't need that. And for me, like I said, I just had a baby that just wasn't sleeping again. I had most of the people around me telling me that I needed to sleep train, and I tried it, and it didn't work, which felt worse. I had really big struggles breastfeeding, which changed everything for me because, again, I was so determined and desperate. I knew the nutritional benefits. I was in so much pain feeding. He had tongue tie. I didn't even know about tongue ties, lip ties, like everything that could have gone wrong did. And I literally just pursued through pain, through every feeding for 12 months. I just wanted to make it to at least one. And so that's me. That's my day-to-day life, is just struggling with a child who's not sleeping, will only sleep on me for max 40 minutes, screams every feed. I'm screaming because my nipples are on fire. And my husband's coming home, who equally has had a hard day in a different way. But in my mind, I was like, you're not doing it as tough as me. And, we become housemates that just pass each other by. And for me, I took it upon myself to, obviously, I'm feeding during the night. He wouldn't take a bottle. He couldn't help me, and I didn't know how to ask for help. So we just were very, very obviously disconnected, and just intimacy, I don't think it existed at all. It would happen when it happened and it was great, but there was no talk around it. And I guess it was just that big elephant in the room that we both didn't talk about for a very long time. And so for me, we were away for a family holiday, and, I just sort of had that dark soul or dark night of the soul, like just where I was like, fuck, there's just so much wrong here everywhere. And so for me, I look back and I'm like, well, obviously, I'm grateful that I hit that rock bottom, and I was sort of the first one to kind of be like, okay, look, like this isn't working for either of us. I'm not enjoying it. You're probably not enjoying it either. And we started having hard conversations. But I know and can see and imagine that many couples don't actually ever have that conversation. And so you just do your thing, and you just wait and you wait, and maybe you wait till your kids are old enough and they're out of home, and you go separate ways, and maybe you don't survive earlier than that. So I do think what Emma raised, and even, Cass and I coming to it in a different way at a different time, there has to be that connection and that honoring of you guys as two people who are in love that also have children together. Because for mothers, like Emma said, with matrescence, it's that emotional, physical, spiritual, mental change that we go through. And whilst fathers go through one, it will never be the same as ours, in that we feel it internally from day one. It's internal, and then it's external. And it's almost like I always just have this like invisible umbilical cord to my children. No matter where they are, what they do cellularly, I just cannot forget about them. I'm not sure if men ever feel the same. So for them, it was like an external change. So he would go to work and maybe often think, oh, cool, I've got a baby at home. For us, it's like there is not a moment that we don't think about this other being, no matter where we are in the world or what time it is. And so there's this inability to fully switch off. So you can imagine like in intimacy, it's so different because it takes a lot of willpower for us to be like, I'm going to forget that my child is there. You're hyper vigilant all the time. You're hearing phantom cries. Your boobs are leaking. It's not a vibe. So, but for us as well, co-sleeping, I mean, I feel like people need to talk more about co-sleeping and that in terms of intimacy. I remember even when we saw you in Byron Blake, that we were all saying how we all still sleep with our kids, and I still sleep with both my kids. My husband's in one bed, I'm in another, but our intimacy is so great today. You got to get creative and you got to structure things in, and it has to be, and as unsexy it is for men, and my husband does sometimes come around and be like, do we have to like actually just like say, can't we just kind of just happen? I'm like, it might, but if it doesn't, like, I would rather just like schedule it in. And as you said, Emma, like I'll have to say to him, wake me up because I want to spend some time with you, but I've got to lay with the kids to bed, because show me a child that goes to bed willingly by themselves, please, and teach my children. And I also do genuinely love to lay with my kids to bed, but I will fall asleep as well because motherhood and business and life is exhausting. And as soon as my head hits a pillow, I'll fall asleep. But sometimes it's like, and I know it's unsexy for a guy to be like, hey, are we still on? Yes, we are. Hold on, let me wake up. Give me 5 minutes to freshen myself. So like sometimes it comes down to that. And it's like, well, it's either that or we don't do it at all. So, and again, it's just a season. It's just a phase. I know that my children, especially my son, I'm waiting for him to be like, ew, this is weird to sleep in the same bed as my mum. Like, we'll get there, I know. But I'm like, if we don't hold on to anything of just us, we're going to forget it. And we're going to be like two people who still live in the same house. And then the kids go and it's like, oh, hello, who are you? Like, so, you know, it's hard, but setting those foundations, I think, is so valuable because the hard conversations only get harder and each child brings about different challenges. Like my two children are so different, and I thought I'd navigated a lot of things with my first, and then you get a second and you get another, and all these ideas that you had about schooling and swearing and there's so many things come up that you're just like, oh shit, we hadn't thought about this, or this child's bringing this one up. But if you have that foundation of hard conversations and hearing each other out, whilst also being so heightened of the load of motherhood and life and sick kids and sleeping and co-sleep, like it's so much pressure all the time. And so you're heightened, you can get really heightened and defensive in conversations, and it's triggering because it hits wounds of when you were a child, and you know, there can be a lot. So you've really got to be able to work on yourselves and be able to have hard conversations so that as they grow and change and get harder, you've already been practicing it enough that it doesn't just become one of those things that is so hard, you just never go there.
Mm.
So yeah.
Thanks, Rach. All three of you co-sleep. Yeah. Am I right in saying that? Yeah. Cool. Fuck, I'm learning so much. The support connection that you feel like you needed or have felt that you needed in that 9 months, what's the difference between round one? I know you're halfway, round two, halfway, give or take. What's the difference between round one and round two when it comes to support and what you needed, what you got, and what potentially you feel like you might need more of in the second one?
I feel like what everyone says is true of the second time around is so different. My first pregnancy with Riv was lush. Like I was doing yoga all day. I was meditating, walking on the beach, getting massages. Like, what the hell? How did I have so much time? It was the best. I was just, I was totally in this spiritual goddess mode of researching and reading books. And some days now I'm like, oh, that's right, I'm pregnant. Like I kind of forgot about that. I probably should eat something. It's so different when you're chasing a toddler around. I'm super lucky with Tice that he saw his sister being born when he was 10. So he had, and it was actually quite a traumatic birth. But he had no fear around, like he wasn't like, I know some men it's like, that's women's business, that freaks me out, I don't want anything to do with it. He was like, no, it's birth, like it's cool. And I remember we birthed during COVID, and when there was, constantly changing of restrictions and things, he was like, hey, if for some reason our midwife like isn't allowed in our house, we'll just free birth, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess so. He's like, I feel totally confident. Okay. We'll talk about that, but I'm pretty sure that the midwife will be allowed in our house. Like, anyway. So he went into it with no fear, I guess, around all of that, and was able to hold space for me. We originally had a friend who just finished studying her doula thing, and she was going to be our doula, and we're like, yep, sweet. And then at 38 weeks, she pulled out. And I was like, oh, we're going to have to find someone else. And this lady who we'd done a hypnobirthing private course with was like, I actually think that he's got you. Like, you're going to be okay. Like, Tice's daddy doula. And he was, during the whole birth, absolutely incredible. There was not 1 ounce of fear or trepidation in him. And any moment that I wavered or was like, oh, this is like really getting intense, I would look at him and there was never an ounce of pity or fear or anything in his eyes. It was just fully like, you got this. And he's a coach and has been, you know, he's coached athletes and things like that for years. So he was in coach mode. He was like, okay, it's been 2 hours since you last had a drink. You need to keep drinking to fill up your bladder to help the baby move down. You need to make sure you're eating some sugar to keep your blood. Like, he was just so in that mode. And it was actually really amazing support, because that's the masculine energy, right? So he held that masculine energy so that I could just totally be in the vortex of birth and in my feminine. And I loved giving birth. Like, I'm so excited to give birth second time around. And so I feel like during the pregnancy, it was quite interesting, because it would always come up around a full moon that I would just be so emotional. And I don't know if there's any science, I should look into this, but it felt like, even though I obviously wasn't cycling because I was pregnant, I was cycling with the moon emotionally. And every time a full moon would come, I'd have some massive breakdown about sometimes like a cat video and sometimes about like a past trauma or something. Because, you know, birth opens a portal for deep healing, and the baby is wanting you to clear so much of your karma so it doesn't have to carry it, right? So if, you know, I think one of might have been Rach touched on before, if you're willing to go there and you're willing to actually see it as a rite of passage and a portal of healing that's opening, so much can be cleared. You know, they often say that childbirth is like 10 years worth of pregnancy condensed into however long that experience is for you. So I was like, okay, I've got some stuff that I want to work on. And so that was our preconception journey as well. It was way more emotional and spiritual than it was necessarily about herbs and diet. We kind of already had that stuff down. So during the pregnancy for Tice, it was like holding space emotionally for someone that was just riding these really intense emotional waves, whilst also trying to have that perspective of like, she's also pregnant. There's also pregnancy hormones. Like, let's not let her mind run away with her. Let's keep her grounded, all these kinds of things, which I think can be hard for men because they go into like fix it mode. And he learned pretty early on that I did not want him to fix the problem. I just wanted him to listen and tell me it was going to be okay and make me feel safe and allow me to be heard. And again, that comes from having hard conversations of when he would go into fix it mode and me having to be like, I don't need that right now. I just need support. So he really was that emotional support. And then I also had to navigate my like, screw the system, I don't want to birth in hospital kind of thing. And, you know, his reflection back to me was like, if you don't clear that, you're going to end up with that's going to be your lesson. And so I had to sit with so much fear and all the stuff I was holding on to and my like anger and angst against, because I feel like I went down this, I didn't know anything about birth before all this. And I went down this wormhole and I was like, the system's so broken. And I became angry and fearful, but in a different way. I mean, fear is fear, right? And so I had to really work on that. So he was really great at holding space for all of that. But also, you know, I think it was Rach as well that mentioned before, it's men never truly get it. Like Tice describes it as like, he's a passenger to a process. He can see that I'm going through something huge and that on all levels, like physically, my body is changing. And I mean, intimacy during pregnancy is another conversation. Like for me, postpartum, I was like, let's do it. I can't wait to get back on the train. Other women, it's like, no way. But during pregnancy, it was like, I was kind of, I wanted to try, but I was like, it just wasn't the same for me. And Tice was like, you know, all these women talk about pregnancy orgasms and how amazing it is because there's extra pressure and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, it's just kind of awkward and you're trying to, you know, like the things that you normally love, you can't physically do. So you're like, you know, he describes it. He's like, it was literally like making love to a whole new person. I had to learn your body as the things that I would normally do that would turn you on didn't turn you on. And so suddenly he's like, how to press that button? That doesn't work. It's like, it was like having a whole new partner in intimacy wise during pregnancy as well. And then that's, I think, why I loved postpartum, because I was like, I feel like I'm back in me again. So like, yes, let's go. So it was a lot of, holding space for body changes, and within, with him being able to just witness physically, emotionally, and mentally and spiritually, I'm going through this huge change that he understands on some level, but he's not in it. And it's not really for a lot of men until he obviously knew he was going to be a dad and he was preparing for it in his own rites of passage and things like that. But it's not until the baby comes out that often it's like, okay, well, now I can actually do something, and now I can actually change a nappy or, soothe a screaming child or help and support in these ways. And, it's often, I think it's hormonally when the child turns 2, that there's like a hormone switch that happens in the father. I can't remember exactly which hormone, don't quote me, but basically they then get this instinctual thing where they shift and suddenly they step up more because the kid needs them. For those first 2 years, I breastfed River until only last month. They want mum, they want boobs, their babies still, even in that kind of early toddler phase. And then suddenly they want dad more. And Riv's I've been lucky that he's always settled with Tyson, always been happy to go with him. But there's sometimes they just want mum, they just want a boob. There's nothing dad can do. But now that the boob's not part of our journey, it's obviously I was aware of it, but it's been beautiful to just watch it naturally play out. Like they've had the whole day together and they just have the best time, and he loves being with his dad, and Tice loves being in that role of teacher, and he can, Riv can talk and he understands. So they have this beautiful dialogue together that's so different to the way that, you parent a baby. So I think for a lot of dads as well, it's supporting the mother more through that process. And then knowing that their big moment of stepping up and teaching those children so much about life comes as that, that masculine role evolves. It's all seasonal. So then to answer the question about this pregnancy, it's definitely more about being intentional for us. Like with River, we had this beautiful ritual every night of rubbing oil on the belly, and Tice would and sing mantras. And, we were both so connected to this belly and how beautiful, and it was like this ritual. And now, we're falling asleep at night with a toddler between us. I'm forgetting that I'm pregnant. It's so different. So then it becomes kind of like the intimacy that Cass was saying before of making time for it. We're actually like, we need to make space. It takes 5 seconds to connect in with this bump and this baby and feeling into its little spirit and giving it, the second child's never going to be the same journey as the first, but giving it something, giving it that honoring of the process of my body changing and the baby growing and feeling the kicks and things. And, it's like River's obsessed with the belly, but then also now it's become his baby and he doesn't want dad to touch it. I'm like, well, that could be a challenge. Dad will go to put his hand on the tummy. No, my baby. Okay. So it's definitely different, but I've found this like being in pregnancy now, I need his support so much more, but with River, because I'm tired. There, I had morning sickness. There was days where I was just in bed vomiting, or I had a migraine, and you totally fall apart and you're like, I actually can't parent right now. So what I need from you is to just, I don't need you to in the first pregnancy, maybe it was like, can you rub my hair? Can you get me
go and get me something?
My feet. Yeah. Now it's like, just get the toddler out of the house. I can look after myself. I just need the space. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a very different way of supporting me this time around, going into it, I guess, a little bit more eyes open, but also knowing that every pregnancy is different. And, he'll say things like, oh, but you're not as sick as you were with Riv. And I'm like, yeah, but it's way harder because I have a toddler. So yes, technically
rest.
Yeah, I'm not in bed resting, having you rub my feet like I was in my first trimester with Riv. I'm chasing a toddler around. So the support just looks so different. And I think if you're able to communicate that, that's the really big piece, because often, and so many of the women I work with, they internalize and they just get stuck in this loop of their head of like, well, fuck you. You should have noticed that the toddler was screaming. I was tired. And don't you realize that I'm pregnant and how hard pregnancy is? But how do they know they're not going to be pregnant? Tice actually did a sweat lodge ceremony last weekend, and sweat lodges were designed by women originally as with the intention being of the closest thing they could create to mimic the intensity of childbirth and labor, because the idea being that you don't leave that sweat lodge and they keep adding on more intensity and more herbs and more things. And it's sensory deprivation. It's all these things. So the women designed it as an initiation process for Tice. And he did that for the first time the last weekend. And he was like, wow, it Well, he's like, whilst I don't want to be the guy that's like, I feel like I've experienced what it's like to give birth, because no one wants to say that to a pregnant lady. But he was like, I feel like I get why they designed it this way, because it really is an initiation. Like, you've got to step up. You've got to, it's a mental game. It's a physical game. It's all of these things. But once you're on that train, you can't get off. And, that's childbirth, right? The baby's coming out one way or another once that process starts. So, I think things like that men can do that in their own way enable them to have some sense of empathy and understanding of what their partner's going through, so that they can support without just, kind of being like, oh, I don't know what to do. Like, you're pregnant. It's like, well, actually, let's get in there and ask the conversations. What do you need right now? Okay, you're clearly very emotional over this cat video, rather than saying that's a bit of an overreaction. Just hold space, because you don't mess with pregnancy hormones.
Never. That's one thing that it was really clear to me. If I haven't learned anything yet, it's definitely that piece. Cass, what did you feel like you needed, or what you got from a support point of view in the 9-month or the pregnancy?
I guess with my first, I was very, like, even though I was super sick, I was just like in the mode of, I can do it myself. Like, I can just in that. I didn't even know how to ask for help, to be honest. And that was probably a big initiation. Not so much pregnancy. I survived and I did it myself. I mean, along with Dave and along with a very supportive boss who held space for my vomiting every morning. And but I guess with Hallie as a baby, I mean, probably after the first 6 months, I was like, I actually need to learn how to ask for help. And especially to Dave, like, he was obviously helping, but I was it's that resentment piece, right? Where you're like, you should know. And it's like, oh, I actually have to voice the different things that I am wanting and needing. Yeah. So I guess, my first pregnancy was just wild, because I just knew nothing going into it. I knew nothing about birth. I was just surviving the sickness. And I guess the second was very different. I knew the support I needed, even though it was quite different, obviously, because I had a toddler. So a lot of it was based around other people helping me meet Callie's needs so I could meet my own. But that is still really hard for me to be like, okay, I need to ask my mum to help with this, and I need to ask my mother-in-law. I remember asking my mother-in-law and just feeling so embarrassed that I needed that, but working through it. But I actually think pregnancy support is I think it's the first year after that is really lacking, to be honest. I think the mothers are held through pregnancy fairly well in terms of, like, physically. There definitely should be some more, like, spiritual and mental prep, but overall, postpartum, I think, is really lacking in support. And that's why a lot of mothers have to turn to sleep training, or, society has given us all these little things like dummies and
Devices and stuff.
all these devices that mimic what mums do, so that people don't have to step up and support the mother. And it's just so sad, because then when us as mothers decide that we want to do it, how our intuition tells us, how, the way that we've been doing it for thousands of years, society's like, well, you've got all these other things. Like, why do you want to do it like that?
Yeah, you're punishing yourself. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, no, we need to rewrite how society supports new mums in general, and how they value them, because we're just not getting that at the moment. It's like, why are you co-sleeping? Like, you could just sleep train them. Why are you,
Have you tried just putting them in a cot?
Yeah. So in terms of pregnancy support, even though I was sick, I felt really supported and loved on. And I felt that real disconnect when the baby was born, that it was all about the baby, when really the baby and mum, like, dyad is so closely linked for the first 18 months, 2 years, that supporting the mum is supporting the baby. Like, we don't need someone to come and hold our babies. We need someone to come and make us food so we can hold our babies, or do this so we can, because that's what's biologically meant to happen. Like, we're supposed to be and bond with our babies. And there's just this real disconnect, I feel feel in how we support new mums. I don't know if I answered the question.
You did. You did.
I
You
did.
answered it well.
Cool.
And the final question for you, Rach, just to kind of roll off the back of what Cass said, when you think about the support that you got or that you needed postpartum, what advice would you give to fellas that are listening in wondering how they can support?
Yeah, I mean, me and Cass just have so much in common. Everything she's saying, I was like, it's rolling off my tongue. I just had an inability to ask for help, and I had this, I can do it, which I mean is ingrained in us because women we are capable of the most incredible things. Like labor is just a whole other thing, and a natural birth as well. And I wanted to do everything myself, but I didn't realize at what cost, and that I couldn't do anything. And that didn't mean anything about my ability to be a mother. And I guess I wanted, the healthiest pregnancy, and I wanted the natural birth. And, I did all the things which for me were quite easy. Like I said, I'd already set those foundations, and I had aligned myself with, an amazing midwife, and I got those things. But I also wanted to be the perfect mother, and I'm still figuring out what the hell that is and who the hell she is. And I think that sort of ruined me and ruined my experience because I was just trying so hard to do everything right, but I just didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't want to ask for help, but I wanted help. And like, it was just, sort of not my own fault, but I guess I just didn't know what I actually wanted. And what Cass was saying is that we biologically have these desires, like it was for survival. Like we will go to the ends of the earth for our child, and we know what it is that they need. We can communicate with them in a way that no one else can if we are allowed and supported to be able to get that feedback and trust our intuition and trust our baby's cues. And that yet society throws us all of these things to stop our babies crying and fix things and replace ourselves with devices and, and get our kids to sleep off us because it's too much. And, baby wearing, some people just shame it or just are like, but why would you want your baby on you in a thing? Like, don't you want it to put it down? And it's like, no, it actually feels so good. And there's so many hormonal benefits to smelling your child's head. Like we want them on us and with us. They are a part of us, but it is so hard to do life and to hold a household and have a job and move our bodies and do other things as well whilst caring for our child. But if we have support there, if we have the village, but most people don't have the village, it's just not how we live. So for a man, we kind of need you to see outside of us and the baby, what can be done, what needs to be done. But also, I guess us women have to be okay with asking for it because sometimes it's not obvious. Men are single focused. So, we know the Queen's Code. They will just see one thing and won't be able to see what we can, which is also another thing with intimacy, right? Especially as a mum, we're just thinking about billions of things. Whereas the guys, like, we are locked and ready, loaded to go, not even thinking about the child, could wake up when they're due for a feed, all of these kinds of things. So there's that big difference as well. So knowing all these things, but I guess for me, the support that I got or didn't get, like Cass said, the pregnancy was pretty easy. I mean, you've got a caregiver, unless you're choosing to free birth, which majority of people don't and wouldn't for at least their first anyway, but you have a caregiver, you've got regular appointments, you've got someone checking in on you. Yeah, mainly it's just the physical stuff. But if you're lucky, you get someone that, focusing on your mental and emotional health. There's support out there. But most midwives and stuff don't see you after you've given birth unless you pay for it. And even still, it's only a couple of weeks, but once postpartum, always postpartum. And like we've said, that first up to the 18 months can be really hard. So there's just a lack of support, but also a lack of acknowledgement that support is needed for that first year afterwards. So you've got to be able to have it within your own household. And I guess, again, just being able to ask for what it is that you need, knowing what it is that you need, knowing, like there's just so many things that you don't really realize until you're there. Like, do you want to co-sleep? Do you want to, like, is breastfeeding important to you? Like, Like for me, I never really had the conversation to my husband of like how important breastfeeding was to me. And everyone kept saying, well, if it's so hard, like, why don't you just stop? And I was like, that is the last thing I need to hear. Can you just help me get through this? Instead of everyone was trying to look for fix-it solutions, you know, and why don't you go see this sleep specialist? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? And it's like, you don't know that I'm on Google 24/7, Googling every freaking goddamn option, fix-it solution. I've scoped them all and I don't want to do any of them, but I need someone to help me just deal with what's happening with me. So sometimes it's not even trying to take away what it is. It's just a space for you to be heard and to be felt and to just be able to say that like, fuck, this is shit some days. This is hard and this is exhausting. And whilst I love breastfeeding, I'm also like, can you get the fuck off me? If you're not feeding, you're sleeping on me, someone's touching me all day. I love it, but I'm also like, oh God, give me some space. And for someone not to be like, oh, well, why don't you just stop feeding then? Or why don't you like stop co-sleeping then? You just want someone to say like, yeah, I see you. That must be exhausting. You know, is there something around the house that I could do? Or you sounds like you need a meal or something so that it's not like, it's not trying to fix what it is that you're choosing to do, but it's supporting you in and allowing you to just feel the whole array of emotions that come with it. There's some really incredible moments and there's some really, really hard moments, even if it's because you're choosing to do things that you want to do, but it's hard as well. So I guess, yeah, it was just someone maybe being able to see things like Cass said, like meals, things around the house, like trying to, you know, keep the house clean. You know, I don't know. I guess it comes down to what it is that you're desiring. For me, like moving my body was so important. So for me, like if someone said, hey, like, do you want to go and train and like I can put Lucas in a carrier and I'll baby wear him, I was just like, you would fucking do it. Like you would hold him, because they would be like, I'll push a pram, or like I'll watch him if you put him asleep in the cot with a monitor. And I was like, that is not possible. Like, would you hold them for me? For them to be like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how life-changing that is for me to be like, oh my God, I'm free. I've got my whole body free. So like little things like that. So just not trying to change what it is and how they are doing things, but supporting them in ways that is in aligned with what they're choosing to do. So I guess, yeah, that's sort of what I wish I had. Second time around, yeah, is way easier. Your problems are very different. You know, you've got a lot of hindsight, foresight. You know what you're in for. You've got a lot more acceptance that seasons and phases change, like especially that first year. You know, I think Nick knew early on he took it hard the first year, that he felt like Lucas didn't want him, need him, like him. He was like, I literally can't do anything. I can't settle him. I can't feed him. Like he doesn't want me. And it was really hard for him to bond because he didn't really know ways outside of that. Either did I. But when Emma was saying about that sort of 2-year mark, I'm like, yeah, it was so beautiful for me. And that's actually, I vividly remember being like, oh, I think I could have another child and survive. Like I was so scarred. I was just like, I can't have another child and go through that again. Like I really was considering just being like, I'm done with one. But I got that release and saw that bond and saw them having their own sort of connection and went like, oh, okay, it actually does change. And I could see Nick come alive as a father. I was like, oh, you're getting to experience all these moments that I've been experiencing and you've just been watching from the sideline waiting for your turn. So knowing that will come, second time around is a lot easier as well. And then, yeah, I mean, Bella was a very different baby. She was super easy, like fed like a dream, still co-slept and stuff, but I just had a different perspective. So I was a lot happier. She was a lot happier. Family was a lot happier because there was so much more acceptance and surrender than, oh, it shouldn't be this way. I had obviously attracted a lot more like-minded mums and communities and families, and just knowing that you've got other people who do the same things as you and their relationship is still thriving. And it's like, oh, there's evidence of another world out here. I don't have to keep fighting what was happening. That was a hard thing as well when you're trying to tell yourself it shouldn't be this way. So second time around was a lot easier in that, yeah, there was more surrender and more knowing that the phases end, it goes so quick, and, you know, he could bond in a different way and he could help by, yeah, taking the other child away. But the first time it's kind of like, you know, they're just waiting over there, sitting over there, but you kind of just 50-50. I think the father has to kind of have a little bit more initiative to kind of see, well, how can I help here? How can I contribute? How can I support in a way that's not intercepting the things that I can't do, whether, it's so different if you're not breastfeeding, you're bottle feeding. But if you're breastfeeding and co-sleeping, I think it can potentially put a big strain on the relationship because there's just a physical body in between, just on that mother all the time. So it gets a lot harder, and I don't think there's a lot of support and awareness around that too. But a lot of mothers want to and need to be supported in breastfeeding and co-sleeping for it to last longer than, a couple of weeks or months.
Well, one of the things you said there, Rach, was a piece around like-minded. And as all three of you know, Shani and I value massively what you guys have got to say and are looking forward to picking your brain when the time's right. And also, as all three of you mentioned, Shani's intuition's amazing, and no doubt she can kind of trust herself and back herself in with tuning into that as well. So girls, thank you for jumping on and giving such insight. Some similarities, but obviously a lot of differences as well, which will help all males have a better understanding of what they can do and just understanding the process as well. So I appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. Thanks for facilitating a very important conversation.
Thanks, guys.